Ooby-doo, it's everyone's favorite boomer and vintage lens enthusiast. Today we're going to be looking at Tamron AF aspherical LD IF 28 to 200, 3.8 to 5.6, diameter 72, that's the filter ring. Model 571D, made in Japan. Serial number 9011462. I bought this from B&H in a condition 8+, which means it shows sign of wear. But there's a lot of grunge on it, and when I wiped the grunge off, it actually looked really good. I mean, really good, right? So I said, cool, maybe I got lucky. So if you look at the optics, there's some dust on it, right? But if you look at the optics, they don't seem to be fogged. But when I took a high-intensity LED flashlight and I shined it through, I could see the two middle elements where the diaphragm blade is. They had a very even, moderate fog. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to give you my theory. When I wiped this off, it was like some brown tar. That's what it looked like, right? And it was pretty bad. I could see why it definitely looked grungy. But after I wiped it off, yeah, I said, damn, this thing looks pretty good. So, but it has this fog in it. The diaphragm, there's always two elements where the diaphragm is in between them, and they always tend to get fungus or fogged or industrial fallout. And this one does have moderate industrial fallout, but it's very even. So yeah, I guess it was an 8+. I was hoping I'd get a little bit lucky. If it was more cosmetic damage and it was clear optics, I would feel more better. So otherwise, I can't see anything wrong with it, except for that. So I said, well, what am I going to do? I know I bought a used item, condition 8+, and I slapped it on the Rebel XTi, and when you know the damn thing works, right out of the bat, no problem. Notice there's no aperture ring, you got to dial it in. So I went out in the backyard and I took some pictures of my roses and stuff, and it seemed to work. I said, okay, I got to give it a real test. I got to go to a car show. There happened to be a car show the following weekend, so I went to the car show with just this lens and this camera, and I blasted away, and they came out really damn good. The autofocus was acceptable on all of them. It was excellent on about half of them, and I only got a handful where the autofocus didn't capture, and I think that's because I took a picture before I gave the lens a chance to lock in. So out of all the pictures I took, only a handful failed for the autofocus. What I did was I had to increase the contrast 2 clicks. Well, let's look, shall we? Let's look. Menu. Picture style. User defining 1. Jump. Sharpness all the way up. Contrast was 3 clicks up. Saturation and color tone are nominal. And that's all you could do on this camera. So what happens is, because there's this moderate fog on those two critical elements, well, that lowers contrast. So you boost the contrast. What happens? The darks get darker, the lights get lighter. So I had to post-process them. A lot of darks I had to boost, and there's still a lot of detail there, which I was shocked. And then a lot of the highlights I had to, bring down also. So I didn't do any sharpening. I did sharpen a couple, but I felt I didn't have to. In fact, I thought this camera and lens combination had what I would call a film look to it. It looked like a really good film scan, and you'll see that in the pictures in the slideshow following. So what's the verdict? Well, I guess it's a keeper. Now, Tamron supposedly made 1 million of these 28 to 200s from when they started to when they discontinued it. There's a whole bunch of different versions where they added stuff like a spherical LD, XR or something. They have a whole bunch of other acronyms they tag onto it. So there are earlier ones and later ones. This looks like, as far as I can determine, was discontinued around 2002. I'm doing this in 2005, so we're talking like a 23-year-old lens. Piece of crap, huh? So functionally it works, huh? Look at that. So I got the autofocus on, so that's sort of locked. okay? But you can't manually focus. What's the problem with these older cameras, especially Canon? They didn't have a full focusing screen. They make you rely on autofocus. So even if the autofocus was funky, if I tried to put it in manual, since there's a manual switch there, I'd have the damnedest trouble focusing on this screen. So I was lucky. The camera was doing better than what I could manually focus with this lens. All right, so there's that. So yeah, it looks clean in there, really. And it doesn't. There's some very slight fog on these elements, but to take a zoom lens apart and clean it is like a nightmare. It's a nightmare, and it's all plastic, and I'm sure something would break. I thought it clunked a little bit, but doesn't seem to now. Let me take it off again. It clunks a little bit. Maybe it has a floating element. I don't know. I'm sure they would have said that. So I had no troubles with autofocus. It seemed to consistently expose. Of course, because I had the contrast up, everything was biased dark and light. But the exposures were right on the money. How does this compare, well, to this? The Sigma compact hyper zoom 28 to 200. Better. This is a way better lens. Look at this is smaller diameter. It's a little shorter lengthwise too. Let's open it up. Let's do a comparison. Oh, this is definitely shorter. It's more compact. It seems lighter. But what good is it if it doesn't work? Tamron, and I mean Sigma, F Sigma. That's all I could say. And I bought this 10 years ago when they still had value, and I paid more for it than I did to this. So I feel like I had a pretty good bargain with this. In fact, this lens is probably going to stay on this camera forever. How's that sound? Was it one other thing? It's not waterproof. Oh, what did I say about the brown tar like crud I took off? I think a lot of these lenses were owned by smokers. I mean, really bad smokers, like chain smokers. And I think that this, it's very even fog on those two elements in the middle. Maybe that's residue of smoke. That's what I think it is. Tobacco smoke, absolutely. I seen that in another lens. I bought another lens. I bought this same lens except in silver for the Pentax K, and it has a aperture ring, so I can stick it on a mirrorless camera if I choose to. But I put it. I'm going to save that for another video. But the silver had some sort of golden patina on it, like tobacco residue, right? And it had the same thing. The two lenses in the middle had a very even fog on it. So it has to be, usually fungus isn't even. Fungus have spots, you know, where it's heavy in one spot and not the other. So I'm thinking a lot of these older lenses were probably used by people who smoke tobacco. Now, I also bought a third lens that's supposed to be in excellent condition, and I want to see if there's any difference. Now, we're going to look at this slideshow, and then there's going to be another one on the Pentax K mount, on the Pentax camera also, and then you could compare it. Are they the same? Are they better? And the third one, I think it's a Nikon F mount. So we're going to look at that on a different camera and see how that works out. But for now, this lens is perfectly matched to the XTi, which is 10 megapixels, had a beautiful, smooth looking, not blurry, but smooth looking film look to it. Oh my God, I shot at ISO 400. This is the magic ISO for this camera. And it was going from cloudy and overcast to bright sun. And the camera tracked the exposures perfectly. Now, I did have a couple of unintentional camera movements. That's where if you're at 200 millimeters and maybe you're shooting at less than 1/180th of a second, then there's chance you're going to see some jiggling. But let's just jump right into the slideshow and check it out, and you decide. There's two purposes to this video. One is to demonstrate this equipment. The Tamron 28 to 200, 3.8 to 5.6. The Canon XTi, which is a 10 megapixel DSLR. And the second purpose is for gearheads and people who like car shows and stuff like that. The Waldwick, New Jersey car show, I think, is the best car show you could go to. They have it in the train station parking lot, and it's usually on a Sunday. And the trains run every 10 minutes or 15 minutes, so you get this backdrop of cars and trains. It's just pretty cool. And they have a whole bunch of cars there. And it gets really crowded, like around 10 o'clock to closing time. It gets pretty crowded, but you know, I like to get there early, watch the cars roll in, and then when the crowd starts to thicken up, I thin out, and that's just the way I roll. So I got this particular Tamron 28 to 200 millimeter from B&H, and it was a 8+. It showed signs of wear. As I mentioned before, it had some grunge on it. I wiped it off, didn't look too bad. It clunks a little bit when you shake it, but they're the two elements where the diaphragm has moderate, I don't know, industrial fallout coating on those two air glass surfaces. So I had to jack up the contrast, and had to reduce the exposure bias to keep the highlights from being blown out. And that's just the way it is. But aside from that, these photos look like I took them with film, and that's what's really cool about it. You know, maybe you have a second DSLR kicking around and you don't know what to do with it. You know, you can't give it away, or you could sell it for 20 bucks or something. Well, you pick one of these cheapo used lenses. They made 1 million of them, you know. So, and different flavors, of course. My flavor was the Canon EF mount, and they seem to be hard to come by. I've seen a lot of K mount and F mounts, but not too many Canon EF mounts. But that's neither here nor there. Now, I also bought the same lens. Instead of this one was silver, the other one is black, for a Pentax K mount. One was another bargain type lens, and although cosmetically it looked cleaner, it still had the dreaded industrial fallout coating in the those two elements right by the diaphragm, and it's almost impossible to take a zoom lens apart and fix it properly. So I figured for the money I knew I was getting into, and well, I happen to have a Pentax K100D that I'm leaving it on, and I can just pick it up and go. Now that's 6 megapixel, and this the XTi is 10 megapixel, and it seemed to be a perfect match resolution-wise, really. I mean, but then, you know, these lenses were discontinued in 2002, which is like 23 years ago, and that's all they basically had for consumer-grade DSLRs is, you know, 8, 10s, and 12s, really, that people could afford. Of course, they always have pro models that had more resolution, but that's a different story. So I really like the way this looked. Now, I did some preliminary tests, and I said, well, it functions, okay. So I went to the car show, and it functioned. That is, it autofocused, the exposure worked, except those times when I didn't give the camera lens enough time to click in. I only got a handful of rejects. All the rest were totally usable. I sharpened a couple, but only a handful. Most of them, I ended up adjusting the levels, like boosting the shadows and reducing the highlights. That was a given with almost all of them. But aside from that, they're exactly how they came out of the camera. Of course, they were cropped to 16:9 and resized to fit this 1920 by 1080 format. I really like this lens. I have two Pentax K-type. One, I found in excellent condition. It looked cosmetically better, and it had almost no industrial fallout coating on those two elements. And I put that on a Pentax KR. I'm going to go to another car show, and you'll see the results of that shortly. But, you know, Waldwick, New Jersey, there is, they have it right after Memorial Day, the week after Memorial Day. Sometimes it'd be a little later, sometimes it'd be a little earlier. So this year it was on June 7th. We had a particularly cold spring, chilly. You can see people still wearing jackets. I wore a light jacket with a hoodie on it. And when the heavy overcast rolled in, yeah, I was glad I had it. But then when the sun came out, I sort of had to like mosey onto the shade a little bit. But there was only brief periods of this bright sun. Mostly it was varying shades of overcast. But the lens handled really well, considering that it has, I don't know if it's fungus. It looks like some sort of environmental fallout. Maybe the people who owned this lens smoked. Back in the 2000s, lots of people smoked more than today. Or maybe, how come there's a whole bunch of these lenses that look like were fallow? People used them, got tired of them, shoved it in the back of a closet, forgot about it for 10 years, and then they sold it to a big superstore in the city for 10 or 15 bucks, and then they turn around and mark it up, right? So I knew I was getting into A+, wasn't the greatest condition. Usually I like to buy my lenses in excellent plus, like new, like that. But it still did a good job. The colors are extremely accurate. You know, it just did a really, really good job. What can I say? Check out this dashboard. Look at that. Wow. You know, like I said, the Canon series of DSLRs don't have a focusing screen. It's an aerial screen. So if the autofocus had crapped out, there's no way I could not have done better manually focusing this lens. On a more modern DSLR like the T series, they have a live view, and then maybe I could have done a lot better, but then it has its own issues and stuff. And although I'm into vintage lenses, and I really like vintage lenses, you know, when you're doing everything manually, you're picking the aperture manually, you're focusing manually, hope your camera picks the shutter speed for you, well, you do lose some immediacy, like to get candid shots. And I gotta admit that I really like the fact that this thing had autofocus, and I could set the shutter speed, the aperture, and this camera picked the shutter speed for me. I really like that a lot. I noticed that there's a lot of leg room in the shadow details, in as much that if they look like they were underexposed slightly, I could bring out the shadow detail just by adjusting like the levels or the highlights or the shadows. And that was really nice to know about the Canon, that there's a lot of leg room. And there was some headroom in the highlights too. Not as much. You really couldn't overexpose the highlights a lot and expect to recover them. But if they were only slightly overexposed, then you could bring in those highlights. But what was happening, because the lens had so much of this, the lens, the air glass surfaces had so much grime on them that, well, it was just making it almost impossible to get a good picture in that regards. So the mid-ranges were good. When it was overcast, and there's a wide range of levels, but no extreme highs or lows, and it did really good. So this lens is staying on the Canon XTi, the 10 megapixel DSLR, and I'm just going to do fun shooting with it, you know. And the same thing with the Pentax K100D. That one's got its own dedicated Tamron 28-200, and that's going to stay on it for a long time. Now, the good one, the one that is in excellent condition, well, that'll be on and off the other Pentax DSLRs I got, depending on my mood. Now, when the sun came out, the colors were bright and vibrant. I noticed that I would have to, I think, permanently knock the saturation down one click, because I had the contrast up, and when you have the contrast up, that really oversaturates the colors. Here's that train. Here's a Sunday, and the train's running every 10 or 15 minutes, and they had a big express train, too. Now, the interesting is, the government wants people to use mass transportation, but if you want to go somewhere on a weekend, like a Saturday or Sunday, you'll get a ticket if you park in this train parking lot. How about that? That's a joke. Don't you think that's a joke? You know, on Sunday, you want people to go somewhere and not use their cars, but use a train. You think they say, yeah, come on in, use our parking lot. You know, and there weren't any like shopping centers or stores nearby that you would spend hours. Maybe you could pull in and run down to the ShopRite or the farmer's market and be there for 15, 20 minutes, pick up your possibles and get out. But, you know, you know, if you want to use the train and be gone for like 4 or 5 hours, then, but you can't do that. There's no mechanism for that. You can put a decal in your car, or you pay at the kiosk, you pay your fare for a train, and it spits out a little ticket you can put in your windshield. Why don't they do that, you know? But, oh, here's the police. Bottom line is a decent combination.